Hi! Some creatures live better than others. Your cousin's cat sleeps all day, eats on schedule, and pays zero rent. And you need permission, money, documents. But that's not because the universe hates you. It is because the world is organized. And in this system, people decide who gets what or who will be the one in charge. And that opens a door for politics. If you lived alone on an island, politics wouldn't exist. But you don't. So now, decisions have to be made. Politics is what exists when people have to live together and make decisions that affect each other. Shared space, shared resources, shared rules, and shared problems. So then what? We decide and make other people follow those decisions. And if you don't listen, something bad might happen. Like the algorithm stops pushing your videos. And that's power. The ability to influence behavior, make decisions, or control outcomes. Bosses, police, governments, teachers, corporations. But power by itself doesn't last. So what do? We make it feel normal. People follow rules more easily when the rules feels fair. Votes, rules, customs, paperwork will pretend matters. When legitimacy is high, power can stay in the background and relax. And that's authority. It's power you don't question anymore, you don't argue with it. Teachers give grades, judges give sentences, police give tickets. Once this kind of accepted power stays steady, it can be organized into something bigger. If you stack enough rules together, add borders, uniforms, and paperwork, congratulations, you've just built a state. Police enforce rules, courts settle disputes, taxes pay for it all. To make it work, we've got something called governance. It's how states turn decisions into action. Laws get written, rules get enforced, money gets spent, and that road construction that started when you were in the middle school is still not done. The way governance is structured depends on the political system. A political system answers three questions: who's in charge, how did they get there, and what happens if people say no. Different systems answer these questions in very different ways, and that's where things get interesting. You want a say in the decisions? You don't want someone else deciding everything for you. You want input. When people get a say, that's democracy. Votes, ballots, people running for office. In theory, everyone participates. In practice, half the people forget. But democracy comes in different forms. In direct democracy, people vote on the issues themselves. In a representative democracy, people pick someone else to decide for them. One scales badly, the other complains loudly. You can't vote on everything, there's just too much stuff, so you pick someone else to decide for you. That's representation. Parliaments, congresses, city councils, that friend who orders for everyone, you trust them, mostly. But this creates another problem. Most democracies use a simple rule. The option with the most votes wins. Simple, efficient, and occasionally terrible. Votes matter, but the rules matter more. It's all about how the counting works. That setup is called an electoral system. They decide who actually wins. Winner takes all systems, split it up systems, same votes, different winners, and democracy isn't the only option. Back to systems. In authoritarian systems, one person or small group decides, and public participation is limited. Elections might exist, sort of. Opposition exists, briefly, but there is a more extreme version. Totalitarianism doesn't stop there. It's not just about laws anymore, it's about controlling your daily life, what you see, hear, and think. Constant messaging, watching everyone, one party, no alternatives. Think about Big Brother, but with worse user interface. Moving on. You don't trust people with unlimited power, neither does anyone else. That's why people write rules before things get out of hand. A constitution sets the basic rules of the political game. It says who can do what they're not allowed to do, and what they can't take from you. It's the highest rule in the system. Basically, it's the terms and conditions nobody reads until it's too late. But the rules only matter if they apply to everyone. That idea is called the rule of law. You and the people in charge have to follow the rules. The same law every time, for everyone. In other words, the same law should apply to a billionaire, a police officer, and the president. At least in theory. Without that, laws are just suggestions with a better branding. Putting all power in one place is risky, so political systems split it up. That's separation of powers. One branch makes the laws, one enforces them, one interprets them. It essentially prevents the government from becoming someone who made a mess and then says it was intentional. It's a professional distrust written into the system on purpose. But just splitting powers isn't enough. So systems add checks and balances. Each branch gets tools to limit the others. Vetoes, court reviews, confirmations. You make a decision, someone else gets to say no. No one gets absolute control without a fight. Politics is less about trust and more about controlled interference. People disagree a lot, so someone has to decide who's right. That's where courts come in. Courts interpret laws and resolve disputes. Judges, trials, arguments over what the rules actually mean, lawyers get involved so everyone loses money. But courts don't run everything. Most government work isn't done by politicians, it's done by bureaucracies. Agencies, departments, officials. They implement policies, manage programs, and generate forms. The type of forms that you never had to touch because your mom did it for you. Big countries are complicated. Different regions want different things, so government organizes power in different ways. In federal systems, regions get to decide some rules for themselves. In unitary systems, decisions come from the center. Think of government like pizza. Federal systems let regions choose their own toppings. Unitary systems order the pizza for everyone. The US lets states argue over pineapple. France just decides what's for dinner. Both of them feed people, one causes fewer arguments. Governments make promises, but promises don't matter if the government can't actually do anything. That's a state capacity. State's capacity is a government's ability to actually do things, enforce laws, collect taxes, provide services, roads, schools, safety. If Uber Eats can find your house faster than emergency services, capacity is the problem. Politics isn't a solo game. You don't usually run for power alone. You need allies, money, and a shared message. That's where political parties come in. Political parties organize people, ideas, and resources to compete for power. Campaigns, platforms, coalitions, basically like group projects in school, but with the worse vibes. And similarly, not everyone fits perfectly. Parties are built around ideologies, sets of beliefs about how society should work. Alignment matters, until winning matters more. Elections are the mechanism for choosing leaders and allocating power. They turn preferences into outcomes, imperfectly. They don't measure truth, they measure participation. Winning power isn't automatic. You have to convince people you're on their side. That's a campaign. Campaigns are organized efforts to persuade voters. Ads, rallies, slogans. Everyone hears what they want, and promises everyone forgets later. But persuasion isn't free. Campaigns cost money, a lot of money. That's a political finance. Political finance is how campaigns raise and spend money. Donations, spending limits, super PACs. Democracy but sponsored. And money usually wants something in return, the kind of present that asks how it's doing. People and organizations have interests. They want policy to favor them. That's lobbying. Lobbying is the practice of trying to influence lawmakers and officials, corporations, unions, advocacy groups. Usually politely, very politely, sometimes too politely. When influence crosses legal or ethical lines, it becomes corruption. Bribes, favoritism, abuse of power. Everyone agrees it's bad, disagree on where it starts. You don't experience politics directly. The algorithm decides what you see. Media filters information, frames narratives, and shapes public opinion. News websites, social platforms, commentary. If it gets clicks, it spreads. If it doesn't, it disappears. Breaking news every 5 minutes. Curated just for you. Neutrality is optional. When information is deliberately controlled to shape beliefs, it becomes propaganda. It simplifies, exaggerates, and repeats a lot. And repetition often beats accuracy. Let's zoom out. Ever wonder why people argue about politics like it's a sports team? That's ideology. Ideology is a set of beliefs about how society should work and who should have power. It shapes what people think is fair, normal, and obvious. Markets, equality, freedom, order. It also explains why every comment section turns into a war zone, and there's a lot of different ideologies. Liberalism emphasizes individual rights, personal freedom, rule of law, and limited government power. The idea is that free individuals protected by laws make better choices than a centralized authority, in theory. Conservatism emphasizes tradition, stability, gradual change, and skepticism toward rapid reform, usually sticking to the institutions that have already survived history. Socialism focuses on reducing inequality through collective ownership or redistribution of resources. Outcomes vary. Communism is a form of socialism that seeks a classless society with no private property and centralized control. Looks good on paper, historically the paper catches fire. Fascism emphasizes extreme nationalism, authoritarian control, and suppression of opposition. The state comes first, opposition does not. Very bad vibes historically and no subtle about it. But political conflict isn't random, it follows predictable fault lines. These are called political cleavages. Urban versus rural, rich versus poor, religious versus secular, center versus edge. Different societies emphasize different divides. But once a cleavage hardens, politics stops being about policy and starts being about identity. That's when compromise feels like betrayal. People like belonging to groups. Nations are big ones. That's nationalism. Nationalism prioritizes loyalty to the nations above other identities. Borders, symbols, us versus them. History suggests this sometimes escalates. It can unify people or turn everyone against each other. When people feel ignored, they get angry. Populism taps into that. Populism frames politics as a fight between the people and the elites. An elite is usually whoever you're mad at today. Disagreement is normal, hate is not. That's polarization. Polarization is when your brain sorts people into us and them, based on politics. Same facts, different teams, no listening. Once politics becomes identity, compromise stops working. Most political fights start online. Political conflict is what happens when they leave the comment section. It's what happens when groups clash over power, resources, or identity. Protests, strikes, uprisings, same arguments, just less moderation and more consequences. Protests and movements are collective efforts to pressure leaders or change policy. Sometimes they work, sometimes they get ignored, sometimes they escalate. When people stop believing the system can be fixed, they aim to replace it. That's revolution. A revolution is a rapid and fundamental change in political power or structure. Regimes fall, new rules appear. It's a little more serious than the pinned comment saying this will be fixed soon. And not all revolutions end well. Most don't. When conflict turns violent within a country, it becomes a civil war. Same state, different sides, everyone loses, especially the one who stay. When states interact with each other, politics becomes international. Cooperation, competition, and conflict, but now with a flag. States don't like being told what to do. That's sovereignty. Sovereignty is the principle that a state has the right to govern itself without outside interference. Borders, independence, non-intervention. Basically, mind your own business, but official, and power still matters. Geopolitics looks at how geography, resources, and power shape relations between states. Location matters a lot, but neighbors matter even more. Here's where things get dangerous. When one state tries to feel safer, other states feel threatened. That's the security dilemma. You build defenses, they see a threat, they respond. Now you feel threatened too. Nobody planned a war, everyone prepared for one. That's how escalation happens. When competition turns violent, that's war. War is organized violence between political entities. Armies, invasions, alliances. Politics but louder. And some conflicts don't really end, they just pause. A Cold War is a conflict without direct fighting. Economic pressure, proxy wars, espionage, and constant tension. Everyone prepares, no one relaxes. Constant conflict is expensive, so states create international institutes. These organizations try to coordinate cooperation and manage disputes. The UN, WTO, IMF. Think of them like a parents in a room full of toddlers who all want the same toy. They don't control the room, they just try to stop it from burning down. Some problems don't care about borders, climate change, pandemics, migration. These are global challenges. They require cooperation between states that don't trust each other and definitely don't want to pay. Everyone agrees the situation is bad, just not bad enough to save starving polar bears in Arctic. And this is where politics gets psychological. You like to think you're rational. You're not. The less you know, the more confident your opinion feels. Your brain calls it certainty and trusts it. Political psychology studies how emotions, identity, and perception shape political behavior. Fear, loyalty, anger, especially anger. Your brain takes shortcuts. Cognitive biases are mental shortcuts that simplify reality. They don't just make you wrong, they make you sure you're right. Your brain doesn't correct mistakes, it just defends them. Most misinformation isn't spread by liars, it's spread by normal people by hitting share button because something just felt important. Moving on, in the real world, political systems aren't pure. They're messy, improvised, and constantly changing. Most countries combine elements of democracy, markets, state control, and authority. Politics never looks like theory. That's because theory assumes cooperation and reality assumes incentives. Countries mix systems because they have to. They adjust rules to survive. Some drift toward more control, some drift toward more freedom. None of them stays still. Politics isn't broken, it's just permanently unfinished. Democracy usually doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes quietly. That's democratic backsliding. Courts weaken, press freedom shrinks, elections still happen, technically, but not all systems collapse. Authoritarian systems often adapt instead of breaking. They adjust rules, control narratives, and survive longer than expected. Because no system ever reaches an endpoint. They just keep responding to pressure, to conflict, and to people saying this isn't working anymore. So what have we learned? People have to live together. That creates decisions. Decisions create power. Power needs legitimacy to last. Authority makes it feels normal. Institutions try to control it. Democracy gives people a say. Authoritarianism limits it. Electoral rules shape outcomes more than votes alone. Ideologies explain what people think is fair. Cleavages explain why society is split. Polarization explains why no one listens. Conflict escalates from protests to revolutions to wars. Psychology matters, information matters. And reality never looks like theory. No political system gets it right. Each one solves some problems and creates new ones. In the end, every system is just answering the same questions. Who has the power? How do they get it? And what happens when people say no? And that's politics. All of it. Well, almost all of it. Explained fast. Alright. This was a lot and took tons of effort to make. If you get something out of this video, vote with a thumbs up. If this video gets like 1,000 likes, I'll have to make a part 2, because that's how politics on YouTube works.